So speaking of maple leaf moments, if you were watching our program yesterday, you saw this. And we shared the story sent to us by William Foote, a monument that he has put up in Mulberry, Florida, in the Anglers Green Seniors Park. It is a commemoration of Canadian and U.S. veterans. Well, I'm not going to tell the whole story because he's going to tell it himself. But it got us thinking about this, and it really sparked our curiosity. So we set out to find Mr. Foote, and as it happens, he's not in Florida. Sir, we have a storm coming. You should be in Florida. You should be in Mulberry right now, but in fact, you're at home in Welland, Ontario, and that's where we've reached you. Nice to see you, and welcome to our program, Mr. Foote.
Thank you, Heather. Thanks for having me.
We're going to show a number of pictures of your monument because you sent us some more. Tell us about it and how it came about.
Well, there's a lot of veterans, disabled veterans and retired veterans living in the park, and we all get together and do what we normally do, tell war stories and, you know, the good old days and things like that. And I said, you know, one thing we don't have here is we don't have any monument to the veterans that have passed or the veterans that are still serving. So we got together and we put our heads together and raised some money, and the people that own the park were kind enough to let us construct it and raise the flags.
Beautiful. Looking at those shots, the monument, remembering those prisoners of war, missing in action as well. It's all there in the Anglers Green Senior Park. And you yourself, 42 years in the Canadian military from the time you joined in 1965. And I know you have deep ties as well in other aspects of your family going back in the Canadian military. So let me ask, looking there at that Canadian flag as someone who served, what does that Canadian flag mean to you?
Well, it's a sense of pride everywhere we go. And as you're well aware, I'm sure, whenever we travel with the Canadian flag in Canadian uniforms, we're one of the most respected organizations in the world because of our peacekeeping.
And one of the things that you wrote about your service was how you served alongside American soldiers. And this is the line that really got my attention. We fought together, we bled together, we died together, and no politicians can diminish that dedication to country. With that sentiment, which is so powerful, how do you feel about the president's words, the U.S. president's words and actions pitting Canada against the U.S. in so many ways?
Well, it's irresponsible, to say the least, and I don't think the gentleman is well aware of how integrated we are as a military. Some of our things that we make and produce in Canada are essential for their military to be able to do their duty and basically protect their country. And we do the same thing by receiving things from them. We're all part of NATO, so that alliance allows us to transfer goods and services back and forth across the border with very little inconvenience. Now, if you're going to bring that from Germany or Europe or someplace else, it goes in the bond, and then the time that you have from the time it's shipped until you get to meet your operational commitments is extended greatly.
You know, I maybe should have prefaced that question by making sure people understand. You know, I was thinking more of the sentimentality, but also people need to know you were a Marine engineer. You have an expertise in procurement. So you're talking in terms of the tariffs and how they could have a direct effect on military costs. And that's an aspect to the story we haven't really talked about too much yet.
Well, it's very true. I mean, you know, we're in the largest brotherhood in the world, no matter where you go, Germany or Europe or the United States or the UK or Australia, New Zealand, we're all brothers in arms. And I mean, that comes to the forefront every time you meet another individual that is serving or has served. So that never goes away. And it's a wonderful organization to belong to. And I often say to people, my sons and daughter, if there had been two militaries, I probably would have joined both of them.
That's how much your service, your years of service meant to you. I mentioned going back to your community in Mulberry, Florida. And again, I don't know if we can go back to some of those pictures, but it's not just the Canadian flag there. It is the Stars and Stripes. And as you said, it's Canadian and U.S. veterans. There are many Canadian snowbirds who are in that community, as you told us in writing your Maple Leaf Moment note to us. What is the conversation these days among among Canadians and Americans about the president, about the relationship right now, all of this talk about 51st state and annexation. I'm wondering what you're talking about and maybe what the emotion is behind it.
Well, I talked to a full bird colonel yesterday who was a dear friend of mine, a highly decorated individual. And one of the things that he said to me was, tariffs are a waste of time, and both nations will suffer greatly. It's one of those things where it always sounds good when you say it, and sometimes people believe it. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's just not practical for any nations, especially as close as we are, to put these tariffs in place.
So it's interesting. You keep coming back to the practicality and the pragmatism and the cost of all of that, and I think that's so interesting. Does it, though, as someone who served in the military, and again, as you point out, alongside, does it hurt? Does it make you angry? People have expressed frustration and betrayal to us in terms of the president's actions. Curious about you.
Well, I think we've been poorly treated. When you consider what we do together and how many years we've done this together, from the First World War, the Second World War, we lost Canadians in Afghanistan, the first Kuwaiti conflict, the Afghan war. I mean, we have done everything together as a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And I mean, to be treated this way is utterly ridiculous. And I had a friend say to me the other day, he said, Bill, I know you've been in the military a long time. And one of the things he said to me as a retired military member, he said, I would rather be dead on my feet than alive on my knees begging for help. We've never asked for help. We've never needed help. We're a sovereign country, and we're capable of looking after ourselves. But that doesn't mean we need deterrence placed in front of us to be able to carry on protecting our country and inevitably in the north part of the United States.
William Foote, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for sharing the story with us and that maple leaf moment in Florida. I've enjoyed meeting you, and thanks for the time.
Thank you for having me, Heather, and please be safe.
Thank you.